social media is not going anywhere. So how do we reckon with that fact and meet that situation with trying to approach it in a healthy, good way? I'm much more of the camp of I've been in the trenches with girls who have learned how to actively have healthy relationships to social media and their phones. But it's because we didn't underestimate, me and her parents didn't underestimate her ability to be part of the conversation, to be part of the solution, to checking in with herself to determine like, this feels good, this not, rather than being a victim to it and in that fear mode. There is stuff to fear. I'm not actually underestimating the negative impact that's possible. But what I see is when we tell girls that they're just like, it's hurting them and you should be scared of it. And it's like, it's all just a tension filled space, rather than when I sit with a girl and I'm like, hey, what like social media account is inspiring you right now?
Hello and welcome to Get Yourself Optimized. I'm your host, Stephan Spencer. It is my pleasure to have Chelsey Goodan with us. Chelsey has been an academic tutor and mentor for 16 years with a particular emphasis on the empowerment of teenage girls. She speaks regularly to audiences about gender justice, conducts workshops, and coaches parents on how to better understand and connect with their daughters. She's the founder of the Activist Cartel and the mentorship director of DemocraShe, a nonprofit that guides teenage girls from historically underrepresented communities into leadership positions. As an activist, she advises public figures, galvanizes volunteers, and organizes large-scale events for national nonprofits while also serving on the board of A Call to Men, a nonprofit working to end gender-based violence. Her passion to explore humanity's potential for authenticity, liberation, and empowerment permeates all of her work. A graduate of NYU's Tisch School of the Arts, Chelsey lives in Los Angeles. Chelsey, it's so great to have you on the show.
Thank you so much for having me. Thank you for having me. This is wonderful.
Yeah, so I've been looking forward to this. We've known each other for a number of years. I don't know, how long has it been? A decade?
Yeah, probably a decade.
Yeah, amazing. So you had this book just kind of come together with so many synchronicities and miracles and just opportunities coming out of nowhere. Could you talk a bit about how this all happened or seemed to occur? What brought all this miraculously together?
I know, it's been quite a story because I was a screenwriter in LA, and this was tutoring. I started a tutoring company as like my side job, to make money and so on. And I just kept having, over the years, I just learned what a meaningful part of my life this was, like this one-on-one time with girls, being able to support them, show up for them, so much that I started volunteering my time as a mentor too, because I didn't want to just have access just based on money. And the entertainment industry is so hard. And I ended up having a moment where I really let go of what I thought the outcome should be in that. And immediately this book idea just rushed into my brain in a way. I was like, I am the translator, if you will, for teenage girls. Like, I know how to listen in a way that they feel really deeply understood. And I can translate that out to parents, to adults. And so it's not that I'm even like a parenting expert. It's not like that. It's much more like I'm their portal, their microphone of what they want to say to the world. And everything about the book just came together so fast, and sold it to Simon & Schuster. And it's been wild. And from the moment I had the idea to publication, it's been only 2 years, which is wildly fast for a book.
Yeah. And you had some wonderful success already with the book getting mentioned by Oprah. What happened there?
Yeah. So Oprah Daily bought the exclusive rights to publish an early excerpt, and then they've now quoted me on social media, and I've been a huge support. Yeah, there's a lot in the works that I can't even say yet. That is all very exciting.
Amazing. And what do teenage girls want to say to the world?
Yeah, they want to not feel judged and shamed, which is honestly what I believe all human beings want to feel. And actually, I think the way that teenage girls struggle really inform the same wounds we have as adults, the same struggles we have as adults. And lots of times those wounds happen in our teenage years and we carry them into adulthood. And so it's a lot about how do we help a person feel heard and understood and seen and valued exactly the way they are, rather than trying to fix and change and improve, a kid or even a person that's in your life.
So what do we do? Like, I have 3 grown daughters who are now in their late 20s, early 30s. So, they've the horse has left the barn, so to speak. So is it too late? Is there something I can do to help with my grown daughters to feel loved, understood, not judged, and so forth?
Yeah. Okay. So for older children, I often say the starting point is actually having curiosity about your history together. And maybe you've already done this because I know you lean into these types of care centered conversations, but is making amends is honestly usually a big starting point. And I talk about it, and it kind of concludes the book because that's the clean slate or the new beginning that a lot of parents want with their kid when there's maybe any contention. I'm not saying you have any contentious relationship, but there's lots of build, right? We have baggage with parent-child relationships, no matter what happens. We're all imperfect, messy humans. So I didn't expect to write about making amends in the book. And what happened was I kept asking the girls, what did they want most from their parents? And every single one of them was saying some type of apology. And it was pretty gut wrenching, honestly, hearing the type of apologies they wanted. And it was stuff that it was clear to me that like their parents don't even know, don't even realize. And it's not that their parents are even bad in any way. They just you don't realize how these little things affect kids and how they perceive things differently. So lots of times, I always phrase everything as a question with genuine curiosity, no judgment, no defensiveness, right? And it's just like, hey, was there any time during your teenage years that you felt like I could have done better, or something that I can make amends for now, or something that I can heal now that maybe you didn't feel understood or you didn't feel heard? Like just asking that question, even as a woman, a grown woman, like whether there's an answer or not, if you feel really cared for, and there's almost like relief where you're just like, whoa, okay, like my parents willing to be really honest with me and put their ego aside and really listen to what I might have to say.
So what would be an example of something where you'd mentioned earlier that you might be surprised what something you might have said or done that you thought was small or you completely forgot about actually was a wound that they carried with them for years? What are some examples of those sorts of things?
So yeah, I definitely have some. Because again, girls have told me of. By the way, the book is largely informed by the girls themselves. I quote them. They were involved in the full writing, editing process. They picked the chapter titles. Like I really am trying to stay true to what they want to say. So an example, let's say on a beauty narrative, right? There's so many different harm narratives that happen. Like I have one where my mom innocently told me to suck in my gut twice in my life. That's it. Like it wasn't some big repetitive thing. And it hit me so hard. And keep in mind, I say this with compassion about my mom. Like she's just functioning out of her own narrative, out of that her mom gave to her, right? Like we're all kind of victims of the same system. But she had told me to suck in my gut, and I felt so insecure about my stomach for decades from that, right? But also, a mom commenting on her own looks, her own beauty, her own weight, obsessing about dieting and culture. All those things have real big impacts on a girl. I just had a girl email me the other day after she read the beauty chapter, and she was like, oh my gosh, I wish my mom would have read that chapter because then she wouldn't have just been dieting all the time, which made me think I had to diet all the time. And again, it's not as overt as you think. Another one, that one's a very specific beauty one that tends to happen with moms, is honestly I'm a child of divorce, and I have really good parents in how they handled it. They're hearing later in life of like, hey, we could have done that better. Like when we were in the kind of throes of that fight or that contention, like, could we have handled that better? Is there anything we did that made you feel like either responsible for caretaking for us, or that you had been a cause of this in any way? Like just checking in about how maybe that divorce moment impacted their life. A lot of adults will say, oh, no, it's fine. It's cool. Like we worked through it, but really getting into the subtler moments. And so they can feel like, oh, that could have been better. And it's like, okay, great. I'm sorry it played out that way. We were all doing the best we could. So it could be a big thing like divorce. It could be a small moment, about your looks. There's always opportunity to say things that might have an impact.
So what would be examples if probably a fair number of our listeners are divorced and have children? So what's the process here? How do you find out? Like, it's pretty obvious that kids who go through, parents splitting up are going to feel some anxiety or fear of the future and stuff like that. That's inevitable, I guess, but what are the smaller, subtler things that really stay with the child as they get older and, just kind of wounds them and makes them, I don't know, less than adaptable to this world?
Well, so it doesn't have to even just be divorce, but anything that throws a destabilizing force into their life where a kid then has to become a stabilizing force in their own mind, right? And so it creates perfectionism and people pleasing are two of the biggest things I see with teenage girls specifically. Girls tend to respond with perfectionism and people pleasing because if they think, well, if I'm just perfect enough or if I'm just likable enough, then everything will be okay. Like it'll be better. And I'll stabilize, and it doesn't have to be wildly chaotic. Again, my parents handled their divorce very well and in all objective accounts, right? But I still certainly adopted a type of like help everyone, put everyone else first, make sure everyone's okay type of mentality. And we put that on women in general. There's a lot more pressure to be perfect and likable. And a lot of people ask, why are teenage girls specifically like have the most anxiety disorders of any gender or age category. And what I see, I know people love to talk about social media and we can talk about those impacts, but what I see is actually the pressure on them to be perfect and likable creates their anxiety. And it can, again, be really subtle. It's really, I'll share a story from the book. 15-year-old Marley was like this star volleyball player, was so good at it, so affirmed for it. She made the varsity team as a freshman. Her mom had been a star volleyball player. Everyone was just so proud of her, right? But as I was working with her, I could just tell how stressed out she was, right? She was getting migraines, she was getting stomach aches. And I finally asked her one day, I was like, hey, do you like playing volleyball? And she was just like, well, I like that I'm good at it. And I'm like, right. You're good at it, but like, do you like it? Does it bring you joy? And she was like, I like that I bond with my mom about it. And I'm like, are you playing volleyball to make your mom happy and everyone else happy? And she was like wide-eyed and realized, and she was like, oh no, and I asked, I was like, what is something that just brings you so much joy that would light you up? If she was actually checking in with herself about what she likes rather than making everyone else happy. And she said, well, I do fashion sketches in my notebook on the bus rides to games. I'm like, oh, amazing. Like, I know a lot of girls who are into that. They do this sewing class on the weekends. Would you want to do that? And she was like, oh my gosh, that'd be so amazing. Right. So we were able to bring her mom into the conversation. She ends up quitting volleyball. By the way, I was the first person who had ever asked her if she likes volleyball. And so often when a girl is good at one thing, right, we affirm. And like, that's where her value and sense of worth tends to develop out of. When she switched over to fashion design and so on, it's that she became excellent at that too, right? Like that her migraines went away, her stomach aches went away. She was so much happier. And so it's just these pressures that we put on them so that prevent them from aligning with like their actual authenticity, what lights them up. And again, it's because they think if they achieve and succeed, then they will stabilize their environment around them. So I know that was like a long journey I just took us on from your very good question about divorced parents, but it's a little bit more about how there's going to be always destabilizing things that happen in a kid's life. And how can we actually check in with them and help them determine what creates their well-being.
Yeah. Wow. You're doing such a service for humanity with this book.
Thanks. Thank you.
So with this girl who had migraines and stomach aches, it reminds me of a book called The Body Keeps the Score. And there's another book about how, this stuff kind of spills over from lifetime to lifetime and not just from this lifetime. And I forget which book it was that was on that topic. But if you could have a kind of a cheat sheet on these are the sorts of issues that I'm inheriting from my early childhood and from past lives and whatever, that cheat sheet would be your body, right? So lower back pain, I learned this from Tina Zion, who was a past guest, amazing medical intuitive. Lower back pain usually equates to fear of loss and kind of financial struggle. So if you're feeling uncertain or fearful about your future financially, it can manifest itself as lower back pain. So if you know what these different body parts and organs and so forth are associated with, you can say, oh, migraines, that could be this, that, or the other thing. It's kind of like having a lookup table where let's say that you're you're looking up an angel number, you keep getting 1111 or 333 all the time, or you're looking up a certain animal, a certain bird or whatever, because they keep showing up all over wherever you travel to. That's no coincidence. That's no accident. It's by design, and that's a message. So if you look that up and you say, wow, that really resonates, then you can avoid a whole lifetime of carrying that struggle, that chronic pain or ailment with you through decades of your life. And I'm very relieved to hear that girl, lost that issue with the migraines and the stomach aches, but many of us carry this stuff around for decades.
Yeah, I find too that it's unprocessed emotions and feelings. Yeah. And that's, again, like a big part of the book is the first chapter is feelings, and how do we actually hold the space for a girl, specifically teenage girls, who get very shamed and dismissed and minimized for their big feelings that are dramatic or emotional. And it's so unfair to them, because the truth is all humans have big feelings. We've just, like, as adults, have learned how to better bottle and contain and shove them into our body where they create pain. And what if we just held space instead and listened to a girl vent and are like, yeah, that sucks. That sounds hard. I'm sorry that you're frustrated right now. Actually gave room for displeasing feelings. And again, I will bring up that it tends to be a girl specific thing. Like, boys are allowed to get angry and have that more, a girl, when she's angry, she's immediately laid into about it. So she doesn't have a lot of space for someone to just listen and hear when she's struggling.
Yeah. So do you get I don't want to get too personal here, so you can dodge this question if you want. Through your own health issues and journey, did you come to find that there was like a hidden message or some sort of lesson for you to unpack and process?
Yeah. Well, and all that kind of comes through in this book too. I mean, I very much have healed my own inner teenage girl in the act of writing this, right? Like, art comes out of your own wounds. I would say a lot of what I had going on was bottled, contained, stuffed, repressed emotions that I just never let myself feel, because I was I thought that if I wasn't likable, then wasn't pleasing everyone around me, then I wouldn't succeed in life. And so for me to be upset about something or angry in my teenage brain was like, oh, I'm not going to be liked then. And so you stuff it down. Mm-hmm. And instead and I was a real overachiever. So it was like, go, 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 do, rather than just sitting and being and naming a feeling, right? Like the actual just act of naming a feeling is so helpful. And in terms of research behind this, I included a feelings wheel in the back of the book, because lots of times we're so limited in our vocabulary. We're just like, I'm sad. I feel bad right now. And the feelings wheel expands out into more descriptive words. And I remember the day actually when I landed on disappointed, and I was like, oh wait, I feel disappointed. And then when I heard the right emotion, I was like relaxed. I came over my body. And then I realized that disappointed can be a pretty severe emotion, actually. And we really underestimate how impactful disappointment is. And instead, I gave it its full moment. I cried out old years of disappointment. And you feel an impact in your body when you do things like that.
Yeah, amazing. So how are you helping these teenage girls to heal directly? Not just the ones that you worked with, but the ones that will probably never read your book, and their parents didn't read your book or won't read your book. How do you help them? How do you turn this into a global movement?
Well, thankfully, I have a lot of big names behind this book now, so we're thinking there's going to be a movement. I mean, so much of it comes back to basics on empowering a girl's participation and voice and choice in her evolution, instead of us coming in and just telling her a lot of shoulds, what you should look like, what you should do, what you should be, and breaking free from those types of restraints is a lot of the larger narrative going on with this book. And I believe fully in a ripple effect of these types of conversations. And I mean, the book's not even out as we're currently having this conversation, or it will be out potentially when this airs. But I'm already, from people who've read the excerpt or something, like getting messages of like, oh my gosh, I just had a conversation with my daughter there where I was more honest with her and it had this incredible connection time with her. That's already happening. So I believe that the act of asking the girl, well, what do you think? How do you feel about this? What do you think the solution is? How would you like to handle it? And giving more agency to her can change a trajectory for women in general, like on a societal level. And that's breaking free from a lot of the shoulds that I feel like have contained women historically.
Yeah. Marshall Rosenberg, I think, is the creator of nonviolent communication. And he said that should is the most violent word in the English language.
Well, I didn't know he said that. I love that. I didn't know. I've been talking a lot about shoulds lately. I should know that.
Yeah. And another thing he says, which I think, or said, was really adorable. And it was, don't shit all over yourself.
I love it.
Yeah.
It's great.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. And we should teenage girls, like potentially more than anyone, like they are so tried to be controlled, judged, shamed, and so on.
Yeah. And not just controlled, but stifled and, I don't know, used as a tool or wielded as a weapon, and especially in third world countries, you hear these crazy stories of these girls who get traded by their parents or sold or just the insanity of it is just...
No, and it's not just third world countries. We have a human trafficking problem in the U.S. as well. But you talked about generational trauma, or you hinted at it earlier. I would say sexual violence, sexual assault is something that historically has really been something passed down, I see through generations. And that's something, I address it in the book in the sexuality chapter in a big way, because it is something that's chains that we need to help free women and girls from in a big way. And, so often it's like it's phrased as violence against women, as if it's a women's issue to solve. And if women could have ended the violence by now, we would have done it, right? It is a male violence issue. It's how we're socializing men and boys. Like, why is there so much violence in the first place? And like, what if we actually started having conversations about that instead? Because what girls feel is just their clothes are blamed. They need to do something differently to make sure they don't get assaulted. I mean, only 11 states teach consent as part of their sex education curriculum. Only 11 states. And if we're not even teaching consent at a big level, of course, that would explain a lot. And consent puts the responsibility in the correct places rather than, the amount of dress codes that shame girls, that they are apparently responsible for a boy's inclinations. They're not. A boy needs to be responsible and be taught how to be responsible for that.
Yeah. How do you personally make sense of the injustice and the tragedy, the travesty that's going on all over, everywhere in the world? And in regards to all this, how does it even make sense to you? Or, we have, this beautiful, miraculous world we live in where things are just miraculously provided for us. And yet we have these difficult things happening in the world.
Yeah. I mean, people are functioning out of hurt and pain, right? Like it's that idea of hurt people. And there's cycles, and I love this idea of being a cycle breaker that's happened honestly, in just the last 5 years, I would say that term has become a bigger deal of like understanding what cycles of whether it be violence or trauma or pain that have happened through your family, through your childhood, and how do you heal yourself in a way that breaks that cycle. And I do believe we don't learn and grow without pain. Unfortunately, it's always like your best teacher. As much as I've wanted people to change or grow, it wasn't until they hit enough pain and were in enough pain before they started making different choices. So it's unfortunate that we have to hold a container of a world that has pain in it. And it is an impetus for growth. But in terms of sexual violence, like, yes, we need to bring a lot of attention to just the epidemic levels that it is. 1 in 5 girls are sexually assaulted on college campuses. And why isn't everyone talking about that? That's like a war being waged on them on college campuses. And there's this funny video, the Funny or Die video that I thought did it so well to create like levity so we could actually receive the intensity of that message. And they had like 5 boys hanging out, like a frat house, just hanging out, having fun. And this like bear arrives to their door. And the guy's like, oh no, it's cool. The bear's just going to eat 1 in 5 of us or attack 1 in 5 of us. And they were like, wait, what? 1 in 5 of us is going to get attacked by this bear? And it's like no big deal. No one's talking about it. We're just trying not to look at it or see it. And it gives you this idea, like if that were happening, we'd be killing all the bears, right? We would be doing something about this bear epidemic. And it's not that I'm trying to villainize men or boys in any way. Like I actually have great compassion that they're also functioning out of a society that does not serve them as well. I'm just trying to show how girls in particular feel really crazy that no one's caring enough about this. Like they're like, oh, I guess it's no big deal that it's just like a college campus isn't a safe place for me. And no one seems to care that much about it. So yeah, how would it be different if it was happening to boys? Actually, it would be very different. We all know that to be true.
Yeah. Yep. Male privilege. Yep. So let's talk about girls and spirituality. So what are you finding through these interviews, through your understanding of what girls are going through, their struggles and their epiphanies and so forth? How are they relating to God, to their higher power or not? And what are some of the things that would most help us to help them right now in this regard?
Wow, what a question. That's the first time I've been asked this question on this intense publicity tour I'm on right now. And it's so valuable. And I'm not trying to be an expert on this in any way, but I'm just going to communicate what I've experienced. A lot of it has to do, I would say there's kind of tools in the identity chapter of how do they connect to their authenticity and their inner voice. Mm-hmm. And that is the way in oftentimes, because so often, again, there's so many shoulds and all these external layers that have to kind of be shed, outside voices. And when they connect to their intuition and their inner voice, I find girls have a spiritual nature that naturally develops where they feel that power that's bigger than themselves, but connected to it in a divine way. And so a lot of it has to do with getting rid of like the mean society voice in their head and helping them connect back to an inner truth feeling. And it can be, I'll ask the girls, again, I phrase everything as a question. So like, what environments, what are you doing? What activities might you do where you just kind of like feel really good about the choice you're making, or like really it feels so right for you? And they'll often say activities, like journaling or doing yoga or going for a walk or a hike, or like stuff that again is like much more quiet moments that aren't do, go. Did you get an A+ on that test type of energy? It's a much more look within and trust that. So often we're not encouraging girls to even take a moment to like ask herself, like, does that feel good? Does that feel right? And when I help that build out that voice, that I find is connected to a spiritual energy for them. And then that's when more conversations can evolve about what that looks like for them. Does that feel like an answer? I'm trying to just give a way into it.
That's a good start. I'm curious to understand how you would suggest getting a teenage daughter into being more intuitively inclined or connected, or developing a personal relationship with their higher power. And one guest I had on the show that I was just really impacted by, her name is Echo Bodine, and I read a book of hers called A Still Small Voice, The Psychic's Guide to Awakening Your Intuition. And I read that book, and then I knew I had to have her on the show, and she was gracious enough to come on, and it was a great conversation. And there are really tangible, practical tools in that book on how to develop your intuition and how to receive guidance in different forms. And we all have these abilities, but we're mostly shut off from them because we don't believe in it. And society has told us that it's not real, or it's witchcraft, or it's evil, or it's, it's magical thinking. And so we dismiss it. And that little voice in our head that's telling us, turn left today, don't turn right. And then we end up in an accident because we didn't listen to it. We start thinking, oh, well, maybe I should have been listening to that little voice. So what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah. Well, that's exactly what I was talking about.
Yeah.
That's what is the still small voice inside you and your intuition. And then that's a spiritual center and energy that starts growing and developing in a way that feels individualized for her. That's another thing too, is I find that if you try to slap on a certain, way to do it, or a certain, whether even it is of a specific religion or so on, again, it's kind of, it has a feeling of a should, where a girl will tend to like wall up more. If you do it truly organically from what, and again, it's about asking questions. You were asking, how do we develop this? It's asking questions. It's like asking her I've asked a girl, like, when do you feel connected to something higher than yourself? What activities are you doing? What is that time for you? And again, it is lots of times like listening to music, they'll say, they like to volunteer. A lot of the girls, this book is filled with incredible stories of activism too, of like girls doing extraordinary things to help the world. They really do want to make the world a better place. And the last chapter is power. And I talk about a masculine power versus a feminine power, or like, or how power has been characterized by oppression or domination or wealth or status. And when I ask the girls, what would a world look like if we had only female or a majority of female leaders? And right, it's an oversimplified question, but oh my gosh, they come back to me with these responses of like, the world would be more fair. We'd have more empathy. We'd care about people more. We would be generous. Like, whether you believe women in leadership would do that is beside the point. That's the world that they want to create. And actually their own natural heart is very care-oriented and generous and all about love. And that's what I really end this book on, is the idea of love, and how we are limiting its expression. And, when a girl has lots of enthusiasm, lots of exclamation points and stuff, we love to like brush her off as silly teenage girl enthusiasm. But no, like that power, that love she has, her love for Taylor Swift is real. And it is reinvigorated the national economy. Okay. Like that is not to be underestimated. They ignited Beatlemania for the Beatles, right? Like they have been behind igniting a lot of powerful movements in that their enthusiasm, their love for something. But instead, like you said, stifled earlier, we love to stifle and squash and contain. And I genuinely think as a society, we are fearful of a girl's power and a woman's power. And that is why, as you mentioned, third world countries and sexual violence and stuff, they say when a village gets taken over, the first thing they do is rape the women, because they know that's taking away her power. And the more you can disempower the women of a community, it is an effective tool of war, basically. So we have been underestimating a massive, powerful force that's, I think, really framed on love. And so if we talk about a spiritual nature, again, the best way into these conversations is through a conversation around love.
And God is love. The person who feels disconnected from God feels disconnected from love. That's my understanding. So they see the world as a dark place. The universe is unfriendly. It's malevolent. It's chaotic. It can't be trusted or relied upon. And so they go through life with this tape playing in their head of, am I safe? Where are the threats in this room or this environment? Right. And it shapes your whole life, and not in a good way.
Yeah. The intro of the book is fear in parentheses, and the conclusion is liberation. And a lot of it is how we fear. We teach girls fear. We teach everyone to fear everything. And that is, you're totally right. It's like a block for the energy of love in your life.
Yeah. I love the definition of fear I read in the book, The Game of Life and How to Play It by Florence Scovel Shinn. And she defines fear as inverse faith. So a couple of exercises that I'm just going to throw out there and see if these resonate, that maybe you could, just kind of direct girls to try if they were open to it. One is to have a synchronicities journal. Every time something that's seemingly impossible odds or like something that feels like a sign shows up in their life, rather than just acknowledging it or noticing it, how about they journal it? I've had so much meaning come from journaling. I never used to journal, and now I do it, dare I say, religiously. I do it every day, and I write it to God. Thank you, God, for this, that, and the other thing. And I write down the messages, I write down the challenges and the lessons and the insights I get from those challenges. It's not just about, oh, thank you for my beautiful family, thank you for my beautiful house and whatever. Like, this is really about a relationship with God, and it starts with acknowledging on paper or on digital tablet or something these things that you've noticed, and so you can refer back to them, so you can take an inventory and say, wow, this is amazing. Something that would be a repository of all the beautiful, amazing things that happened, and not just glossing over that stuff. I think that will help the girl really recognize how miraculous her life is and how guided she is.
I love this idea also because it naturally flows with a girl's inclination to journal, right? And again, by the way, journaling has this whole old school connotation of like just a teenage girl writing her crushes in her journal, like in this minimized, dismissive way. And what you're saying is exactly right. It's actually, there's so much research to support how powerful and healthy journaling is. And adults often don't find themselves journaling until they have gone to therapy and have been recommended it, right? But yeah, what if we actually helped to guide a girl who was naturally journaling into something that felt really productive and helpful and spiritually connected for her? That's a great idea.
Yeah. And just one little example of that. So I get a lot of angel numbers, and a lot of times they're repeating numbers because those are the ones that stick out the most, right? So 1111, 111, 333, 444, et cetera. Those appear a lot for me, a lot. But I also get numbers that are unusual, and I need to look them up to know what they mean. So I'll be guided where to look them up. Do I Google it and Google image search, or do I just pick the first result, or is it the featured snippet if there is one, etc.? And sometimes I'll get really unusual ways of getting these angel numbers. So here's one that happened just a few days ago, or like within the last week or so. So I wake up in the middle of the night, and I feel like I should check my phone and see what time it is. And then I see the time, and I look up the angel number associated with that time. I think it was 1:20 in the morning. And so I looked up 1:20, and I was doubting myself. I'm like, was I imagining this? Is this real or whatever? Like, oh, and I had a timer set. I didn't have the alarm as a regular alarm. I had it set as a timer. So I got another number for the timer, which was like 5:38 or something. I don't know, whatever it was. And so I looked up both numbers, and I fell back to sleep. But, I was a little unsure. And it wasn't that I was unsure that God was communicating with me. I was unsure of, like, maybe I'm misinterpreting, or I'm just kind of overreaching and making stuff up. And so I woke up again in the middle of the night, several hours later. And this one was undeniable. It was 3:27 in the morning, and there were 3 hours and 27 minutes left on my timer. And so I looked up that angel number, and that one really resonated. And I knew that it wasn't just about like, here's an angel number without a doubt sign, but hey, you need to trust yourself more. So journaling that, capturing not just the synchronicity or the magic happy accident, it's not an accident, but also what's the context that goes around that. Very important, so I don't know, just something to think about.
Yeah. I mean, I love synchronicities. I've been having so many myself. They come up for me in terms of people, through people, whether it's a friend reaching out or a person I run into in an event, or, always like, wait, what? That's like, it's wild, the amount of connectivity through people I see, synchronicities revealed.
Yeah. So what's an example?
There's this company that I'm hoping to work with, and I feel like I can't give a lot of details, but literally I went to a birthday party this weekend, and it was like the head person of that, who like my agent has been talking to, was there, and my friend was introducing her, and apparently they're friends, and we hung out all night. It was wild. Like just 2 days prior was this whole conversation about me sending the materials and so on. And it was crazy.
Mm-hmm. Yep. That's amazing. And you know what? It's not crazy. It's how the universe is meant to work. It is
Yeah.
the
I've been trying not
manipulative.
to use the word crazy with everything coming about, right? I found like wild feels good because it is kind of like feels like a wild ride, and wild doesn't have like a judgment in the same way crazy does for me. But
Yeah.
I agree. I think words really matter how you use them.
Yeah, absolutely. A word has a matching vibration to it. So even just the difference between the vibration associated with the word gratitude and the vibration associated with appreciation are different.
Yeah. Cool. I totally feel that. I'm so intentional with the words I try to use.
Yeah, it's awesome. So that's one exercise to maybe add to your arsenal is like Synchronicities journal. And it doesn't feel too kind of religious. Like if it's,
Right.
I call my journal my God journal because I'm writing to God. It's more than just gratitudes. It's I'm recording all the messages I receive, etc. But that might feel for somebody who's been in a restrictive household that's very religious and strict with their religiousness, then they're going to kind of not like that. Whereas Synchronicities journal, hey, this is just science, right? It's Carl Jung coined the word and wrote a whole book about it after he had, without a doubt, signs that he didn't have a name for, and he called it Synchronicities and did a whole research book on it. So another little exercise that might resonate with your teenage girl audience is to ask them to, well, first of all, how do they refer to their higher power? Is it God or whatever? And then refer to that higher power and ask, are you there? And the purpose of this is to see that you actually already receive that still small voice, even though you think it's yourself, your intuition, your gut, or whatever, or you just, that's my own inner critic or whatever, if it's not so positive. Well, you're receiving psychically already. And if they do a little exercise of saying, ask yourself in your head, God, are you there? Or however they want to refer to him or her. Are you there? And they get a sense of a yes, or they hear a yes in their head, or they get some sort of visual on their and their kind of third eye, kind of visual part of their brain, their imagination area. They just got an answer. And there is no other answer than a yes. There's nothing that exists that isn't of God. There's nothing independent of God. So there's only a yes, and it's whether they've listened and heard it, or they've seen it, or they've felt it, or they just know it, or they're not tuned in or whatever. And then that's just something to work on. So it's just, I think it's a pretty easy doorway or entryway into receiving stuff psychically from your higher power. What do you think about that?
Well, I would say too, I talk about in the book is actually asking your heart, not necessarily your brain, your third eye. I find that the brain doesn't feel, because of the inner critic is so powerful. It can be so powerful, especially for a teenager, that putting it down, an energy down to their heart, and like, ask your heart, like, is that there? That works differently for them. Like, because that idea of like following your gut or following your heart, I found that to be good. In terms of them naming or defining a higher power, I actually talk about in the book that I go to Al-Anon, which is a 12-step world of where you actually come up with, your higher power for you, and everyone goes through that journey through the 12 steps. And I want to actually bring attention to, teenage girls these days definitely identify in the LGBTQ community in a big, big, big way, much bigger than ever before. And that I've had the joy of kind of witnessing in Al-Anon rooms, LGBTQ identifying people who didn't feel safe from the religious background, the family that they've come from, to be themselves, now finding how they name their higher power in those rooms. And it's been really revelatory to see how they do that for themselves, to like try to own it and what feels good for them authentically. And so I do have a lot of experience with girls not feeling safe in their houses necessarily. And oftentimes they are able to find actually community on social media, which, so often social media is looked villainized, understandably so, but also it's saving kids' lives because they're finding community and feeling accepted in different ways and being able to communicate different ways, because the suicide rate is very high for kids who identify in the LGBTQ community. So I bring it up because I want to create an expansive conversation around it. And that actually is one limitation. When you say the word God to a kid that identifies that way, they think they are not welcomed. That has been my experience entirely. And so the more that we can open up the words around it and what might feel right for them and how they want to describe it, I think is a really important conversation.
Yeah. Yeah. So I did preface that by saying, what is the word that you want to use?
Yeah. No, I know.
Refer to your higher power, and then to ask him or her or it, however you want to refer to your higher power, are you there? Might be a question they've never considered asking. And what if they get a yes? Now they might dismiss it and say, well, that was just me answering it in my head or whatever. But if, and as you say, if you drop to your heart or answer from your heart or reflect, get to your kind of sacred heart space for this kind of dialogue, you'll find that you actually are psychic, because we all are.
Yeah. No, it's cool. It's a cool conversation.
Yeah. All right. Well, I know we're getting close to time. I do want to circle back to this idea of social media and its impact on teenage girls and just society in general. I'm concerned about its impact on our ability to focus and to work in traction instead of distraction. Our attention spans are declining, and we get addicted. The dopamine hits from scrolling and from getting likes and all this sort of stuff I don't think it's healthy. And from my understanding, everything comes from God. So this is for ultimately our highest and best good. So I'm not going to place a lot of judgment on it. I just want to help people get less addicted to social media and to their phones generally, if that's something that they care about or they would wish to pursue. I'm curious what your thoughts are on that.
Yeah, well, so I have a media chapter in the book, and there's a lot of attention on social media is destroying teenage girls' lives and their self-worth, and everyone's talking about that. I know that social media is not going anywhere, or at least not anytime soon. It's here to stay for at least a while. And so how do we reckon with that fact and meet that situation with trying to approach it in a healthy, good way? I'm much more of the camp of I've been in the trenches with girls who have learned how to actively have healthy relationships to social media and their phones. But it's because we didn't underestimate, me and her parents didn't underestimate her ability to be part of the conversation, to be part of the solution, to checking in with herself to determine like, this feels good, this not, rather than being a victim to it. And in that fear mode, there is stuff to fear. I'm not actually underestimating the negative impact that's possible. But what I see is when we tell girls that they're just like, it's hurting them and you should be scared of it. And it's like, it's all just a tension filled space, rather than when I sit with a girl and I'm like, hey, what like social media account is inspiring you right now? I mean, the girls are really into mental health issues and psychology accounts. And I've had so many girls tell me about the different trauma responses that they've learned about from social media or their mother wound, stuff that like people do not deal with until they're in therapy in their 40s. And because they have exposure to ideas in a big way. And the more I can help her actively choose what might be engaging her heart and like her mind in a positive way, then it's less a victim to the scroll. And also changing up a girl's scroll. I mean, you add 5 different accounts into there that aren't, stuff that maybe isn't as good. You add even just 5 and it's game changing, right? The algorithm adjusts. And as much as we want to like be mad at the algorithm, and I get it, like it's a reality. So how can we also like flow with it and flow with a girl's participation in it in a way that she feels empowered?
Mm-hmm. I have an interesting take on the whole algorithm thing that I'm curious to hear what you think about this. I see the algorithms, whether they're Facebook, YouTube, Instagram, TikTok, or whatever, as just another kind of console or output device for the upper worlds, for the heavens to reach us. So if I have like a higher intention to work on myself, to work on my psychology, my addictions or shadow or whatever, and I go to YouTube's homepage, just that intention will change what the algorithm serves up to me, because I'm in this place of receptivity and positive expectancy and knowing that everything comes from God. And then boom, there's a video on the front page that I'm destined to watch. In the case of shadow work for me, which I wasn't really clued into how important that was. There's this channel on YouTube called The Modern Intuitionist, and there was a video that just caught my eye. It was on the homepage. It was from that channel, and it was about the kind of a deconstruction of the movie The Black Swan, and it's all about how to heal and integrate the shadow. And that 20-minute video that I needed to watch at that very moment, right after I had a kind of a run-in with my neighbor who ran heavy construction equipment through our yard and did a bunch of damage without permission, it really riled me up. And then, this seemingly random video shows up that wasn't random. And then that started me on this whole shadow work journey. The algorithm adjusts to your intention, and it's just another vehicle for God, your angels, your guides, your unseen support team to get through to you.
I will say that I have had that relationship to the algorithm in terms of my intention of what I'm very intentional about what I like, because I know you're teaching you also actively teach the algorithm what you want too. It's not even just an energetic intention.
Right.
So I'm intentional about what I like because I know they're going to just show me more of that too. So again, that's activating your own agency in the conversation so that you can flow towards something that feels more positive for yourself. And so, yes, if I put in like 5 psychology accounts into a girl's account or like, I don't put it in. Like I talk to her about it and see what she might be interested in. And we, make it again, sourced from her own interest. But it's a huge impact. You can see it in your own scroll. All of a sudden it's feeding you something completely different that can be positive. I certainly have learned a lot of positive things. Everyone's worried about the beauty standards and honestly, eating disorders is a huge, huge concern with teenage girls. I never want to underestimate that. But again, that's from us feeding them a narrative of what they should look like, which actually starts way before they see it on social media. The average age for a girl to start dieting is age 8. And the first thing that we say to a little girl, when usually you see her, well-intentioned, but still, is you go, oh my gosh, look how cute you are. Look at your pretty dress. And where's the little boy? We're like, what are you reading? What sports are you playing? What's your favorite subject in school? We are telling a girl so young that her value is connected to what she looks like. That happens way before she starts social media, right? So how do we start this algorithm way sooner and help her make the choices that aren't focused on that? So I agree that the algorithm will definitely reflect like a higher purpose.
Yeah. Yeah. And also the intention of the developers weighs in here too. If they have a malevolent purpose as they're coding the algorithms, well, that's going to show up in your app that you're using. So as an example, TikTok in China is completely different from TikTok here in the US.
Yeah, I've heard this. I don't know much about the difference.
Yeah. So here, you know what it's like. It's all about things that will get you off onto like dopamine addiction world. But if you're in China, your time is limited on TikTok and it's only educational stuff, STEM, and they're not these quick cut, short little things that are addicting, but are really value laden, longer pieces of content for kids to learn STEM from.
Wow. Mm-hmm. That is so interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah. The thing is, too, the more we fear social media, the more we're going to block whatever flow it could have that could be positive. Like to me, again, fear is just always not the right choice.
Right. Inverse faith. So if you're fearful about, well, TikTok is being weaponized to dumb down America and the West, where's God in that? Everything has the hand of God behind it, whatever you're going to refer to God as, but it's all divinely orchestrated. So this is for our highest and best good, just like everything else is. And we just look for the lessons and the opportunities. I don't know what else to say about it. I always try and see whatever challenge is in front of me as this is a gift. And my wife, Orion, likes to say that, sometimes the gift's on the bottom. She likes to say that sometimes the bow is on the bottom.
Yeah. And then also my own humility in this too. I was like, I'm not the person over here that's going to solve the social media addiction issue, right? Like a lot of people want that from me, by the way. I mean, I get nonstop questions about social media, and I am not trying to claim like I'm an expert on this because it's way bigger than me, what's happening. All I can share is what the time I've spent with girls actually helping her find a healthy relationship to it. And I know that has value. But there's a lot of angles on this conversation that could be explored.
Yeah. Awesome. Well, we're out of time. So if there's one last wisdom nugget that you want to share with our listener or viewer that you haven't already shared, what would that be?
I think I'm just going to bring it back to just bringing awareness around how our language might communicate shame or judgment. And that is completely causes us to disconnect from each other and actually have a relationship that's real and authentic. And it can happen in much more subtle ways than we think. So whatever we can do to look within to be like, wait, do I have judgment on that? And heal that first so that we don't come at, say, a teenage girl with our own trigger and our own judgment. That's the type of connection and understanding you're hoping for to have with your daughter or whoever. So I would like to leave it on that idea.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Chelsey. You're doing great work in the world, and thank you for sharing your light. Thank you, listener, for sharing your light too. To get the book, Underestimated, Amazon or physical books.
You can get it anywhere books are sold. And you can follow me on Instagram too at Chelsey Goodan.
All right.
For all the details on the book tour and stuff.
Okay. And a website? Do you have a website too?
Yeah, just chelseygoodan.com has all the info too.
Awesome. Thank you, Chelsey. Thank you, listener. We'll catch you on the next episode. I'm your host, Stephan Spencer, signing off.